Hey, it's LSEM Car here. I've got a tips video for you today. This is going to continue our series covering all the different assists that you can turn on or off to help improve your driving and reduce your lap times. Today we're going to be covering the shifting options. So you have automatic, manual, manual with clutch. We're going to be driving the Sebring 2018 C7R. This is the Corvette that we ran during the 12 hours of Sebring. We came in 8th overall in that race. This is the normal assist that I use for this car. Running traction control because it's a front engine GT car. That means basically there's not as much weight on the rear tires and the tires can slide out a little easier, so having traction control kind of helps. So you've got automatic, where it shifts for you. You've got manual, where you do it on your own, and then you've got manual with clutch, which adds the extra dimension to shifting. But we're going to start off in automatic today, and we're going to cover some of the advantages and disadvantages. So first and foremost, the biggest advantage, obviously, the computer is shifting for you. This can be great, but as you'll see here in a minute when we pull the telemetry up, it doesn't really maximize the power of the car. One of the disadvantages, however, and you'll see it here, right there. Okay, that turn right there is a second gear turn, but you'll notice that it shifted me down into first. This is one of the things that is disadvantageous about driving with automatic, is the car, while it does shift on its own, it shifts on its own often in times, in turns during times when you don't want it to. You may be already in the gear that you want to be in for that turn, but then it'll shift a gear lower just because you happen to go just a tad bit slower than you usually do. And by doing so, the torque skyrockets, and that can cause you to slide. So you have to be extremely consistent in order to get automatic to really work out for you. But you'll see here, if you're watching the horsepower, you're noticing that it's shifting around between 488 and 491. So this is typical of automatic shifting when the car is at max power or close to. But it's not always what you want to do. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute, but you'll notice I'm shifting around, I think it's 6,000 RPM. If you were watching the tachometer, on average, maybe 6,000 just above it. So now let's take a look at the difference that you get in power when you're shifting with manual. Now we're not going to be changing any other settings right now. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to pull the telemetry up. And immediately you'll notice I shift right here, 488. So keep that in mind. We're just going to use that as a reference here. And another thing you'll notice there is that, in automatic, that might have shifted down a second gear. That's a third gear turn, though. So we're shifting 488 to 491. But look, you see the horsepower starts dropping off. Now, most people would think, okay, well, isn't that a good thing for automatic to kind of shift you when the power is at its max? Well, not necessarily. Now, looking at this turn right here at the end of the Mulsanne Straight, I could have shifted into 6th gear there. But what would that have done horsepower-wise? That would have dropped my horsepower to around 390, 400. When in 5th gear, I was already around 480 and slowly dropping. So, knowing that that turn was coming up, I purposefully did not shift because I knew I would have more power coming all the way up to the turn if I left it that way. So, you keep the car in the power band longer, you get more out of the car than you would with automatic, which would have shifted me to 6th gear without a doubt. So now we're going to go ahead and pull over. Now, obviously, one of the disadvantages is you have to shift yourself and you have to learn about the car. Manual with clutch, however, adds a second dimension to that, and obviously that is the clutch part. Now, we're going to turn on simulation damage because there is an aspect of damage that I do want to cover with this, and it's something to be aware of. But before we do that, let's go into the controller settings real quick, and I just want to cover this one little setting, and that is the handbrake and clutch being switched. The default settings have the clutch set to the left bumper. That can be problematic if you're not really fluid with your motion. So we're going to turn that on, and what it does is it switches the clutch to the A button. And therein lies one of the problems with manual with clutch. The first time you try it, if you ever come to a complete standstill and you just hit the gas, that's what you get. You have to hit the clutch in order to get the car to rev. You see right there, I was tapping the clutch and then I stopped tapping it and it just died. So, first thing to keep in mind when you switch to manual with the clutch, if you need to get going from a standstill, you have to use the clutch to get it going, just like in a real car. So, with manual with clutch, what advantages does it give you? Well, in GT cars, it doesn't give you much of an advantage. In fact, it can be problematic. You lock your brakes up and the car will stall out. Why is that? We'll cover that in a minute. That's called rev matching. But as a general rule, you don't need it in a GT car because GT cars have what they call a sequential gearbox, which means that, long story short, the shifting is just as fast with manual as it is with manual with clutch. However, if you're in a production car, then it actually cuts your shift time down dramatically to the point where it even makes a clutch upgrade pointless because the shifting is as close to instantaneous as it can possibly be. So really you don't need it in a GT car, but if you're in a production car, if you're doing anything S-Class and below, as a general rule, manual with clutch is going to be the fastest option once you know how to handle it. Now, right here, I'm trying to show examples of rev matching. Now, one thing that manual will do for you that manual with clutch will not is it will match the revs. When you're shifting down from a high gear to a low gear, manual actually matches the revolutions for you. Therefore, you don't have to worry about it. But when you're using the clutch, you actually have to use the gas and match the revs yourself. This in a production car can help you and it can hurt you. So the last thing I want to cover is the damage. Now if you're watching the transmission, you'll notice that every time I'm shifting here, I'm adding 4%. Why is it doing that? Well, it's because I'm purposefully missing the clutch when I shift here. Now, what effect does that have on the car? Well, you can hear the difference when I shift. And just listen to it. You can hear it bouncing right there. So that's what it does if you miss the clutch. This is why I suggest that you switch it over to switch the handbrake and clutch, is because doing that makes it a lot easier pressing two buttons that are right next to each other. So keep all that in mind. This is just something to help y'all out, help y'all understand it a little bit better. If you got any questions, send me a comment or anything like that, and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. There will be more of this to come. Y'all have a good one.